Hi everyone, thank you for coming tonight in this weather, especially. My name is Eliza Back. When we thought about having this panel and having this conversation, what it was going to look like, we thought that Geula has come to, hello, wait 1 minute, it's in here. You're in the right place. Geula has come into our consciousness. Oh, you can come sit over here. There's seats. So the topic of Geula has come into our consciousness and into our lexicon in a deeper and more real way than it has probably ever before. In conversation, it's come up. Is more than just, it's not a song that children sing anymore, we want Mashiach. It's something we're learning about, something we're speaking about. There are signs all over the country, more and more, on more different intersections, reminding us that all roads lead to Har Beit Hashem. Particularly in the aftermath of October 7th, we all felt something profound was happening. We felt like things were moving and changing, and the world needed change, and our nation needed change, and we started talking about Geula, and saying this was, Geula is what we needed to change the world that we're in now, to make it something better. Some people pointed to all the many, many miracles that we were witnessing and said this is Geula, happening currently, unfolding right now as we speak. And it became something that felt real, very real. Children were speaking about it when we had our necklaces, people, it became part of the conversation. Now, with the immediate urgency seeming to have almost faded away, and we're adjusting to our post-war normal, and we have the familiar question again of what is Geula? Why do we need it? How does it manifest? Why is it important in our lives right now? And if those questions were important for us before, it's even more important now that we've lived with that feeling of we've tasted it, we're in the process, and we can't lose that. We feel like it's a very important conversation to continue to have. And we know the Gemara in Shabbos says that when we get to meet Hashem after 120 years, we're going to get up there and Hashem's going to say, Tzipita Yeshua, were you waiting for the Mashiach? Did you long for it? Did you want it? And for a while, we could probably all say, yeah, we really did. And now that it feels less immediate, which it shouldn't, but it could in some ways, we can say, well, what is it? What does it mean for us? What are the different approaches? How do we understand what Geula can be for each one of us? And how am I going to answer yes when we meet Hashem, and when we have to answer that question too, of Tzipita Yeshua. And so we brought together this panel tonight to discuss the different perspectives, the different angles, the different ways of making the Geula real for each one of us. And we hope that when you walk away from this room tonight, you're able to say, I have my approach. I know what it means to me. I know how I can keep Geula present and focused in my life. So I'm going to turn to the panelists. If I can ask each one of you now to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves and your approach to Geula and what it means for us. To you.
Okay, so my name is Tzipora Piltz, and I live in Har Zaitim, the Mount of Olives. So I see the Geula from my house every single day, because I live in this old Arab house in the entrance of the Jewish cemetery of Har Zaitim. Also in the entrance of an Arab neighborhood, it's called Ras El Amud. Have you heard about it? Okay, so it's the East Jerusalem, the Jewish neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. And we lived there close to 25 years. And it's a private house where two families, opposite us, we have a neighborhood in the name of Ma'aleh HaZeitim. It's the biggest Jewish neighborhood, 150 families, living in an Arab neighborhood. Now, what's the perspective of Geula? This is what I see from my house. This is what I see from my bedroom every single day. When I open my window in the bedroom and I look outside, so one thing I do see the Jewish cemetery, a lot of people that were waiting and dreaming and talking about Geula and made of Geula are buried there. Okay, the Rav Kook, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, we have a lot of people. But in the further, I see the Har Habayit. See, when I think of Geula, I think about Bet HaMikdash. So this is what I see. I don't see yet the Bet HaMikdash, but I do see the holiest mountain in the world every single day. I see on the top of it, instead of seeing the Bet HaMikdash, I see now the Dome of the Rock. I see Al-Aqsa Mosque. I hear every single day, 5 times a day, because I just live behind the mosque of Ras El Amud. So I hear Allah Akbar 5 times a day. The truth is I don't really hear it because I got used to. People ask me, do you wake up early in the morning? No, I do not, because I already got used to. But something, but I know this is very, very temporary. Okay? And I know I have to hear other stuff. I know I have to hear the Levi'im singing from what's called the Shirat HaLevi'im, and not to hear the mosque. And the daily life, I belong to a group of women that's called Nashim Leman HaMikdash, Women for Bet HaMikdash. Yeah, we deal with different kind of things. Maybe later on I can tell you. Dealing with waking the awareness to the Bet HaMikdash with women by teaching, learning, and by also being connected to the mountain itself, being in the mountain, going up to Har Bayit. This is something I'm very connected to. So when we talk about Geula, and the Geula is a very, very big perspective, so I'm very focused on the rebuilding of the Bayit Shlishi.
Hard act to follow. So my name is Moshe Taragin. First of all, thank you, Eliza. Thank you, Zamira. And I've been thinking about Geula for a while. I live in Gush Etzion for probably close to 43 years. It was an empty mountainscape when I moved there. Now, thank God, it's a bustling metropolis of settlements and people and yeshivos. And part of redemption is not just high-minded ideas, but low-minded, boots on the ground, infrastructure, families, schools, supermarkets, Zakenim and Zakenos, Berchavos, Yerushalayim, people strolling through Yerushalayim. My Rebbe, who taught me a lot of Geula, Rav Amital, pointed to those psukim in Zechariah. When Zechariah speaks about his apocalyptic nevuah, he talks about pastoral scenes. So Geula isn't just building the Beis HaMikdash, it's also settling the land. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yitzchak in Parshas, told us, Gur ba'aretz hazos, and Shchon ba'aretz hazos, Chazal say Shchon means make a shchuna, make a neighborhood. Even if you have to make a shchina, you also make a shchuna. The 2 languages in the Medrash, a shchina and a shchuna. So I also live near cemeteries, but I live near cemeteries of people that built the template of Geula, because Jewish history is cyclical. So what happened before will happen again. And our avos in Sefer Bereshis, they carved out history. Masa avos siman labanim doesn't just mean that they serve as moral posts for us to emulate their behavior, but they're events. The Ramban says in the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha, when Avram goes to Shem, I think it's in Perek exactly where he goes to Shem, the Ramban says specifically that by traveling to Shem, he carves out the land metaphorically and makes it easier for future Geula. So I live about 10 miles from Rachel, to the north of me.
Where do you live?
Gush Etzion.
Where?
Lon Shmont.
Okay.
5 minutes away from the yeshiva.
My mother lives in France.
Okay, so I live about 10 miles from Rachel to the north, about 10 miles from Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, and Leah to the south, maybe Esav's head. We'll talk about that later. I haven't seen Esav's head there, but you're not going to find Esav's head. I've tried. I've written articles about Geula for the last 5 or 6 years through the OU's Torah Tidbits. This is the only time I'm going to say this tonight. You're welcome to buy my sefer over there. And what I tried to do in the sefer was 2 things. Number 1, to broaden Geula into a panoramic question rather than just asking, is Mashiach coming tomorrow, and whether he has a mustache or a beard. To try to realize that as we move into a new era, we have a new lens. And that new lens forces us to see the values and elements of Jewish identity through a new lens of redemption. Shir Chadasha Shibchu Geulim doesn't just mean that when you're redeemed you say different praise, but your whole perspective changes. And we haven't had people writing about that perspective for 2,000 years. What does it mean to live in the sovereign Jewish state, with millions of Jews flocking to the country? How does it change our idea of peoplehood? Something you alluded to before. Peoplehood used to be very local. There's something called Knesset Yisrael, which was in theory, but now there's Am Yisrael, where we actually live with Jews. Reminds me of Archie Bunker once said, I love humanity, it's human beings I can't take. So it's easy to love Knesset Yisrael. But now we're living with a lot of Jews in Israel. It's a whole different ballgame. How does it change Jewish identity? How does it change Jewish faith? How does it change Torah and mitzvahs? That's a delicate question because Torah and mitzvahs are immutable. They don't change. You don't change halacha, but the flavoring can change. The emotions can change. The experience can change. How do we change our view of non-Jews? For thousands of years, we were marginalized along society. We had a universalist vision, but it was ridiculous. We were being killed. We were trying to survive, not inspire. Now we have a state, and we have an organ that represents the Jewish people as a collective. What does it mean to be an Or Lagoyim when we have a state of our own? And we're wrestling with a prophetic narrative that doesn't make us so inspiring to the rest of the world. And why did we want to settle Gush Etzion and Har did? But that doesn't win us favor with the rest of the world. How do we juggle those two goals, which we don't want to lose grasp of, but in the current situation, they seem to clash. So that was one aspect I've been trying to work out, to create a vocabulary of ideas, not necessarily to create hard and fast positions, but to introduce ideas into the public imagination so we can talk about it in a substantive fashion rather than platitudes and slogans. The second part I tried to accomplish in the book is I truly believe that 80% of the Jewish world believes in 80% of the issues surrounding redemption and Geula. But we spend our time, instead of discussing the 80% about which we agree, arguing about the 20% we disagree. So I try very hard not to be ideologically aggressive and to try to find terminology that's universally accepted. So for example, instead of Reishis Smichas Geula Seinu, I don't really know what it means because there's too many metaphors overlaid. What's Reishis, what's Smichas, what's Geula Seinu? I have other ways to refer to where we are, but we'll get to that later. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish my own time when I'm not busy giving shir in the Yeshiva Har Etzion, is to try to build a vocabulary of redemption that's broad-minded, based on Chazal, based on Tanakh, based on Midrashim, based on the Star of my Rebbeim, and also try to create a common campfire that most people, I think, can agree with, while leaving the other 20% for Kodesh Baruch Hu to give us his decision when Mashiach comes. So thank you for inviting me.
Okay. Zave, I'd like to introduce myself in the following way. I'm the great-grandson of Yusil Raphael and Adina Harvitz, who was a graduate of Volozhin, who bought orchards in 1905 in Ranana. It wasn't yet Ranana. Most of Ranana was actually ours, and it was nationalized by the state. We never got paid for it. We'd be quite wealthy if not for that. And he sent his family to make Aliyah in 1927 to live in Petah Tikva, where he had a half-brother, and sent his son to learn in the Hebron Yeshiva in Hebron, where he was killed in Tarpat, Binyamin Harvitz, and the family then returned. I'm the great-grandson of Ephraim Zalman, Rav Ephraim Zalman, and from Sarah Halperin, who was a Charkiv Chassid, sent by the Charkiv Rebbe to be the Rav of the Hasidim in America, in Denver and New York, in the early 1900s. In 1935, decided to move to Eretz Yisrael. And when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he actually started a very important organization, which builds mikvahs all over the country, exists to this day, Taras HaMishpacha. I'm the grandson of my grandparents, Rabbi Yosef Tzuvia and Dvorah Nechama Rudman, who in 1968, as soon as this is 1967, as soon as the Six-Day War was over, came here and bought an apartment on Chlov Jabotinsky, down the block from here. My other grandparents, Psachia and Esther Hadas Menkis, who as soon as they retired in the 1980s moved to Eretz Yisrael. My parents, Rabbi Dr. Ruben Moshe Rudman, Olav Shalom, Zechron Livracha, and my mother, Tichya Edel, who in the summer of 1973, he had a visiting professorship here in the Hebrew University. We brought our entire family to Eretz Yisrael. There was no Ramat Beit Shemesh, there was no Nefesh B'Nefesh, there was no OU Center, there was nothing. They took me and dumped me into Chorev in 10th grade all by myself, okay? And, but that was their dream, from the great-grandparents, from their parents, from their grandparents. And it didn't work out, we moved back, but as soon as I finished high school, I came back to Eretz Yisrael. Probably, you know Stevie Levinson, Olav Shalom? Was he in Cushman, you were there? Maybe he dropped all over there, my closest friends, whatever. We came back to Israel after we were finished high school, and then for whatever, back and forth a little bit, when I was still single, moved to Eretz Yisrael, started keeping one day with the blessing of my parents, met my wife here. We got married on a Thursday night, had Shabbat Brachas on Shabbos, had Shabbat Brachas Sunday afternoon in Far Rockaway, on the way to JFK, and finished Shabbat Brachas here in Eretz Yisrael on Monday and Tuesday. So if we talk about Geula, if I want to introduce myself to a panel of Geula, that's my perspective of Baruch Hashem. We raised our children here. We're very lucky all our children are here, and it's something that all our children know. They have no way in which they're going anywhere else outside Eretz Yisrael. And that's been something that our family, my wife's family, I could talk about also, how her uncles made Aliyah in the 1960s and 70s. Then you probably know the Berlins. Josh, Danny, that's our first cousins. What? Mo. Yeah, Mo, I played basketball. Okay. Then I became his nephew. He wasn't so happy about that. But there was, I knew my Irish uncle from the basketball court before we got engaged. When he realized his niece was getting engaged to, he wasn't so happy. But okay. And these are our roots here in Eretz Yisrael. I go back even earlier. There's a great-great-grandfather buried in Har Hazeisim, but I don't know the exact. He moved to Eretz Yisrael with one branch of the family, and I don't know the exact derivation of that, so I can't even get there. I've been to his kever a couple of times. When we talk about Geula, it's something that over the past, where are we now? Past 125 years, Klal Yisrael has been doing, and we're a part of that story. Each and every person here has a story similar to ours, not of living Geula. We all picked ourselves up. Most of us probably had really good things where we were. And we're here. And that itself is, to me, the bedrock upon which any discussion of Geula has to come from. When we talk about Geula in Teaneck or in Five Towns, it's all very esoteric and theoretical. Now, the truth is though now, even within those places, so many kids are making Aliyah after the year or two in yeshiva or seminary. It's unbelievable to see. And something, if in 20 years ago it was the battle with parents, now it's with their parents, idud, and their parents most of the time. Go. And therefore I myself feel as a living Geula as part of my family, and living Geula through moving here and the students that we teach and the students that we encourage when we talk about Eretz Yisrael to be here.
So there seems to be consensus that Geula is a process. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight or fall from the sky. Often people use the words Geula and Mashiach interchangeably. Is there a difference? Is one a process and one an event? How do we relate to or use those words properly, in your opinion?
First of all, the question is what's Geula, and we heard of a few things over here. When I think of Geula, I think about a few issues. One is, like I mentioned before, is Beit HaMikdash. We're rebuilding the third Beit HaMikdash. Second is Mashiach. Third is Sanhedrin. Okay, we say every single day, Hashiva Shavteinu Kavarishona, V'ya'atzenu Kevatchila. So what are we looking for? We're looking actually to rebuild again the Sanhedrin with 71, all the rabbis that were sitting there. And so it's a whole, so the Mashiach is a part. Mashiach, that's basically the Malchut. We have the Beit HaMikdash and we have the Sanhedrin. These are three things that we're aiming for. This is what we daven 3 times a day. Now, it's a process. It is a process, but now it's very, very fast, like you mentioned in the beginning. And how do I see things are coming? I'll tell you one perspective that I wanted to talk about is the connection to the place itself, to Har Havayit. I have this group of women that we meet once a week on Monday morning, and we learn about Geula. We learn about Beit HaMikdash. How we have but we meet every Monday morning and we just learn about the topics. We learn the Rambam and we learn the Mishnah. This is something that I really believe that when we learn about Geula, we learn the Mishnah, the Tanakh, the Rambam, it becomes very relevant. And part of this day, we invite people that do actual physical things to connect them to the Geula. And I want to just show you something very special. From this morning, I invited this guy, this young 30 years old, and he said, I want to focus people. We have signs all over the country that assign, that take people to Tzfat, to Tel Aviv, to Yerushalayim, to Eilat, but the place, the holiest place, we don't any direction. So he made these signs. Did you see them all over the country?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So I heard this guy this morning, amazing, okay? His name is Shlomo. And just like he decided after the beginning of the war, in the beginning, like he used to ask people, how do you get to Har HaBayit? So go to the Kotel. No, I want a sign that this is. So he decided to make these. Meanwhile, he has at least about 100 of these. It says Har Bet Hashem. It's another question that asked him why Har Bet Hashem and not Har HaBayit. But all over the country. And this one individual took upon himself and changed the aspect of the people with how do they think about the place that today is kind of neglected. So I bought this. I bought it to put it in maybe, I don't know, I'll see where either in my house or outside in my, I have a parking lot, whatever, I'll see where. But it said, how do you think about it? Where do you have the money? So I just collected donations, and I took a group of young teenagers, and we put it all over the country. And in the who's seen it? Where did you see it? Did you see these signs?
I've seen it. I don't remember.
You've seen it, right? Okay.
I saw a picture of one of them with someone.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
just put
In
one.
Ashdod.
I
I
live
just
in
saw one by
Beit
You live in
Ashdod.
Beit Shemesh.
They just put one to the entrance of Beit Shemesh, and it was a very small grassroots connection of people who they go often up to Har HaBayit together, and they collected the money, and they said, we want to sign here. So it's easy. If anybody wants one, you can reach out to him,
Yeah.
put some money together,
Right.
and put them all over the country.
So this is the perspective when we talk about Geula, is one of the highest points is, after us coming to Eretz Israel, rebuilding Yerushalayim, rebuilding the state, we have a government, we have an army. That's the physical. That's what's called Mashiach ben Yosef. Okay, that's a physical perspective. The beginning of the country. This is what we did in the past 70 years, building the physical part of the country. But now we need the spiritual, and the spiritual perspective is rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash. And this is something So when I think of Geula, is not only ideals, not only but actions. And I want to show one more thing. Yeah.
Just quickly.
What? No, so maybe after. I'll show you after.
Okay.
Okay, after. So this is really good. Okay.
See.
Perspective on Geula. At the beginning of the year, I teach in Geula and other seminaries. At the beginning of the year, we take the girls to the Kotel for the first time. Obviously, many of them, most of them, have been to the Kotel before, and they've been in Eretz Israel before. And once again, that's not like years ago when people came to Eretz Israel. For many of them, it was the first time they came. But I tried to change their perspective. Think about the hostages. But imagine someone, a close relative in prison, and you can see them, and you go visit them, but they're in a supermax prison. And there's a big piece of thick perspex, thick glass between you and them, and you can go there, you can talk through a microphone, but you can't touch them. And the most you can do is you can put your fingers on either side of the glass and be like this. So I don't want to go to the Kotel anymore. I'm going to the Kotel. I started going to the Kotel when I came here as a 14-year-old. That's like 20 years ago, right? Okay. And I used to walk down the Chod Jabotinsky up Har Zion, go to the Kotel every Friday night for the traditional Rikud of the Yeshivat Kotel. And I don't want to go to the Kotel anymore. I want to go to the Beis HaMikdash. And I try to make them understand, if your perspective is Kotel, why are you happy at the Kotel? It's almost sad. Change your perspective. Don't be satisfied with what you have. You want more. There's nothing wrong with wanting more. Right? And when you come down the steps and you see the Kotel, remember once I had a Rebbe, Mashgiach in Yeshiva, Rebbe Ram Grinarik, Zechariah Levracha. He was nifter last year, at the age of about 101. He was a Talmud of Rav Baruch Ber Levovitz. He had learned in Kamenetz before the war. He traveled through he had joined with the Mir Yeshiva. He ended up going to Japan. He ended up in Shanghai. He ended up getting out right before the war began. When I was in Bochum, I used to go with him to be Ola Regel. And he held to be Ola Regel. You had to climb on one of the buildings overlooking Har HaBayit and be able to see the ground of Har HaBayit. I remember standing there with him once, looking at Har HaBayit, watching Arab kids play soccer on Har HaBayit. There's a chidah that says, Shu'alim hilchuvo. Shu'alim is Otiyot Yishmael. Shu'alim hilchuvo. And it's great, we're here, it's unbelievable, we're so happy. Switch. This is part of the process. We're not satisfied with this. We said, are we able to answer Tzipora Yeshua? We have to be able to answer Tzipora Yeshua that we weren't satisfied with what we have. We want more. And therefore the idea of Geula as a process, with all the things that we have, that we accomplished, and all the tremendous growth of everything in Eretz Yisrael, Gashmi, and the tremendous Ruchni growth of Eretz Yisrael, the amount of svarim that are printed on every imaginable area of Torah, the amount of the depth of Torah that's learned, especially the flowering of Pnimiyut Torah, in Eretz Yisrael over the past 60 years. I speak to people I know in America, the great bastions of Torah in America. There isn't that depth of Torah there. There's an unbelievable chidah. I'll finish with this. Chidah writes that the only way the Arizal HaKadosh could have been revealed the secrets that he did is that somehow or other the Arizal HaKadosh was able to be matar himself with the Efer of the Parah Adumah. Otherwise, without that Torah, he wouldn't have been able to reveal that depth of secrets of the Torah. We don't have Parah Adumah, we're connected to Eretz Yisrael. We're bringing out more and more and more and more, and that's all part of the process that we have to realize that we're in to be able to bring us to the place where we're then ready for Geula. I'll just end with a quote from something totally different. Did anyone here ever read Exodus by Leon Uris? Yeah, right? Saw the movie, okay? I never saw the movie, just read the book. There's a great quote in there. There's Akiva and the two brothers at the big whatever, and their old Jewish father in the shtetl, and he says to one of his sons, he says, don't worry about recognizing Mashiach. Worry whether Mashiach will recognize you. Right? On the one hand, but we have to, the process that we're in, watching Klal Yisrael grow and grow and grow and grow, that's the process that makes us ready to be the ones that Mashiach will recognize here. And it's here in Eretz Yisrael because it can't be done anywhere else. It needs that connection to the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael.
Your story reminded me of a story, but it's a story before the story. Evidently, the Kutzker once told his Talmidim, everyone says that when Mashiach comes, everyone's going to grab their coats and grab their suitcases and get on the first train and get on the first plane and run to greet Mashiach. And they'll recognize you, recognize him. What's your story? So the Kutzker was always counterintuitive. Sometimes in life you have to be counterintuitive, to see things from a different angle, from a different lens. So the Kutzker told his Talmidim, in the pursuit of truth, don't fall into cliched thoughts. Don't just think based on patterns that establish in your brain. Try to see things from a different perspective. My Rebbe Rav Amital taught us this. He told us, people say, at first I tried to change the world. That was too hard. So I focused on changing my family. That was too difficult. Say we saw Salanter. And in the end, I just decided I'm going to focus on changing myself. So Rav Amital said, Kacha zeh lo nachon. People try to change themselves. When that's too hard, they try to change their family. And when that's too hard, they try to change the world. So if you just flip things around, you're able to see real truth. You have to have people to put your head in a swivel in life, because if you just keep your head neck straight, you just see things that you're taught to see, rather than thinking things with a fresh set of lenses. So the Kutzker taught us Talmidim that season. I'm going to wait a couple weeks. I'm not going to run to see the Mashiach. I'll wait a few weeks, show up in my good old time when I'm ready. Rebbe, was Pesach? Mashiach's ain't coming. You're going to wait for 2 weeks for Pesach? He said, no, wait 2 weeks. He was playing with his Talmidim. He said, well, why? He says, I'm going to show up 2-3 weeks late. And Mashiach's going to say, Mendele, I waited for you. Where were you? I'm going to look him in the eye and say, Mashiach, das is a chutzpah. You waited for me? That is a chutzpah. I waited for you for thousands of years. Now you can wait for me for 3 weeks. So Chassidus taught us, like you're talking about Pneumis HaTorah, it's good to have a little chutzpah sometimes when it's chutzpah kodesh. There's not Mashiach chutzpah yaskeh, the Gemara, so there'll be a lot of chutzpah, sometimes it's holy chutzpah. I'll tell you another story. It goes back about 42 years ago. I was at Talmud in Yeshiva Har Etzion, Parshas Pekudes, a little forward, around March time, and there was a huge fight in the Cheder Ochel Friday night. People were screaming, shouting, throwing food at each other, and somehow I was all in the middle of it because I was a very identifiable American. What happened that night? Rav Amital, our Rebbe, quoted the first Ramban. The Ramban saw Torah not just pasuk by pasuk as Rashi did, but he saw large, the Ramban, the Netziv, the Rambam, seeing large segments. So he writes a Hakdama, an introduction to every Sefer. In his Hakdama, to Sefer Shmos, Ramban says, how can it be called Sefer Geula? He implies the question. Sefer Shmos ends in the Midbar. How can it be called Sefer Geula if it ends in the Midbar? No Beis HaMikdash, no Melech. So Ramban says that Geula essentially is being in the presence of the Shekhinah, is being with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And our Avos had Geula without a Beis HaMikdash, and Sefer Geula ends even without a Beis HaMikdash. Which means that the core of Geula is the encounter between a human being and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it means to be redeemed. And that can happen, as the Ramban says, even in the Midbar. And of course, the Israelis were irate. They were screaming for bloody murder, and they were blaming it on me. And I said, don't blame it on me. Ask Rabbi Mital why he said that. But of course, they're always looking for a scapegoat. And I was a scapegoat that night because I happened to be born in New York, horror of horrors. So I was like the Aviyah Satoma. In any event, that's how it unfolded. Now, on a historical level, full Geula for all of mankind, not for an individual, not for the people in the Midbar temporary, but full Geula for all of humanity can only happen here in Eretz Yisrael, with the Beis HaMikdash, with Melech HaMashiach. It's important because you all alluded to the fact we're in a process, and we won't complete the Geula cycle until we don't just have buildings and institutions and people, but we have the encounter with the Rebbeinu Shalom that all this will facilitate. But that's how the Ramban defines Geula. At a historical level, Geula is part of history. Namely, as opposed to, let's say, the Western view of history, where Western eyes see history as open-ended and evolutionary. It's open-ended, we know where we're heading, it's evolutionary, each generation evolves beyond the previous one. In Yiddishkeit, history has a beginning, history has an end. The beginning of history is Bereshis, the end of history is the terminus of history, Geula and Eretz Yisrael. The process of bringing history from its beginning to its end, from its inception to its terminus is called Geula. Okay, so it's a really, really long process. When did Geula start? When did Reishis Michas Geula Seinu start? The moment the last Jew to leave Yerushalayim in 70 AD performed the first mitzvah. That we didn't start Geula, as Billy Joel said, we didn't start the It's been burning for years and years. Every mitzvah, every time you went to the mikveh, every Shabbos Kodesh, every Blat Gemara, every Chesed. So we have the schus to be contributing to Geula, not just on the backstage, which you can't see, but on the front stage. There are two stages to history. The backstage, Torah, mitzvahs, chesed, midas, and the front stage, institutions, sovereignty, army, country, land, basic English, but the two stages of Geula. We are the engine. Point number 3, right? History beginning and end. Point number 2, Geula is a process of moving from the beginning to the end. We're the engine that drives that process. So there's a process, we drive it. The end is going to be full and complete knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, coupled with material welfare, because the two go hand in hand. You see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then you also enjoy because the state of your experience is enlightened. And as you alluded to in some of your questions, that's not just a Jewish experience, that is a universal experience. With the other religion that doesn't have as its endpoint the elimination of the conversion of every other religion. Our goal is not to convert everyone to be a Jew, to eliminate them as the infidel, but to show them the dignity of a life of living in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with mitzvos and covenant, and to let them see in 613 the beauty of 7. We keep 613 so they'll realize the beauty of 7. So that's the process of Geula, but the goal of Geula is to use all these institutions, based on Mikdash and Melech. In theory, a person could be Goel, but just being in the presence of Kodesh Baruch Hu. Avram was a Goel because he had that encounter with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. And as you say, of course, a long process, and there's a lot of debate today because a lot of our state is secular and a lot of our state is not abiding by the spirit we were born. Some people see that as a deterrent to Geula, or it's a sign that it can't be Geula. Some people see that this is a slowly burgeoning growth of our people after thousands of years of historical dysfunction. And just slowly cobbling together their Masorah. It's not going to take a generation. Very few of us may see it, but it may take many years.
Well, piggybacking off of that part of how Geula happens, and it is a process and a process that takes time, but we also said that Geula can happen Karafayim. So how do we understand how Geula can happen both in a long process and also Karafayim? And if it's something that happens Karafayim, it would possibly indicate that maybe we're less involved, and the things we do are less important. So how do we understand that for what our active role is in making it happen, either the process or being the catalyst for that Karafayim?
That's every time a question related to that. When you speak of the Beit Shlishi, there's a big question: who's going to build the Beit Shlishi? We know we have two opinions. One is gonna, is gonna come down ready-made. Everybody knows that opinion, right? Just ready-made on top of the Har Bayit. We're not gonna do anything, or we can just do the last, fix. The Rebbe Milubavitch says that we're gonna do the endings, fixing the doors, the gates, but it's gonna fall down from heaven. Or do we actually have to do actions? We have to build, and we have a mitzvah, ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. So it's first of all, it's a very interesting question. What do we do with these two opinions? Because this is opinion that you can see in Rashi. Okay, Rashi talks about it on the Gemara that Beit HaMikdash is going to come, Yered Me'Hashamayim. But I think that a lot of time, if we look at the past 2,000 years and we were in Galut, there were so many mitzvot that we did not keep. And we didn't have the opportunity, at least a third out of the 613 mitzvot, we didn't have the opportunity. All of them are connected to the Beit HaMikdash, connected to the Malchut, connected to the Sanhedrin. And all of these mitzvot are coming up again. Like, for example, the mitzvah of Tchelet, the mitzvah of the Big Day Kehuna. We spoke about garments over here. So we have today people that are weaving the Big Day Kehuna. And I think that we have to do our part. We have to do our itaruta deltaka. We have to show the Kadosh Baruch Hu that we're doing what we could do. And I want to show you one example. Is like I believe that Kohanim today have to learn the avodah of the Kohanim. So I want to say that 2 months ago, my son, he had a bar mitzvah, and I said, okay, so let's take him to different, prepare him to the bar mitzvah. His name is Yitzchak. They're twins. I have an Yitzchak and Rivka. Okay, they're twins. His Brit was on the top of Har Zaitim, looking down to the place of Akedat Yitzchak. That's very special. And so I said, Yitzchak was Gul Ba'aretz Azot. We know they're the only one that did not leave Eretz Israel, and so we went to a very special place in Mitzpeh, Yericho, and they built over there a model of a Mizbeach. And they have a practice school, whatever, like for a Kohanim, to come there and practice the avodah. Something very, very physical, and some of the things we didn't think about for 2,000 years. What's Zrikat Adam? What's all these things of the Korbanot? This is actually what they do over there. So if we were talking to women over here, what's our role? I want to show you one thing. So I brought over here a sample of a few threads, because we have a course of women, crafts like that women do in Beit HaMikdash. They used to weave, okay? Weave the parachot. So this is just from like a month ago. This is we took wool and we dyed it with the Tolat Hashani. Okay. So what do you mean Tolat Hashani? 2,000 years. Who spoke about the Tolat Hashani? Well, now you do speak about. There's a professor in Bar Ilan. He actually found what's the Tolat, and we dyed. And these are different colors. Different colors that we tried dyeing, and to see. And to touch, it says v'chol isha chachmat lev biyadea tavu, touching the materials, touching the wool, dyeing with a tchelet, dyeing with a tolat shani. I don't have here the argaman, but this is amazing. All these psukim that we read are becoming true, And so when we talk, so when we talk about loom, when you learn this, and we have also a course of weaving. Actually, we have a loom and women sitting and weaving. Like women in the Beit HaMikdash, we actually weave, and and with the spinner and the weaver and the loom and everything. And this we show to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're doing our share. We're doing our what's the itaruta diltata. Now it's your part. Your part of that. And this is something that I believe that by Kohanim doing their work, by finding the ketoret, finding all the weaving, it's a combination of itaruta diltata, and itaruta dilera. This is what's going to bring the Geula. These are. Yeah, this is cool. I have to show you. I thought of bringing the loom to here. It's too heavy. It's like this huge. I have it in my middle and my. No, that's also only the Mishkan. I have in my house this huge loom. Okay, I said, how am I going to carry it? So I didn't bring it, but you would see it. It was amazing.
I have Moshe.
Okay.
Okay.
Look, you raised three questions. There are three what's the word, dilemmas or uncertainties about Mashiach, the way we have it. Again, these are all very speculative. Our tradition is very, very strongly opposed to being too detailed and too micro-tagging. Two people at junctures of history tried to provide roadmaps for Mashiach. Yaakov, when he's about to die, they entered the first Gullus, and Daniel, when he entered the second Gullus, and in each case, HaKadosh Baruch Hu from above, either directly in Parshas Vayechi or through a Malach with Daniel, told him stop. And we have a long history for all sorts of reasons to be very, very circumspect and very careful about not being too certain about Mashiach for all sorts of reasons that are way, way beyond this evening, tonight. But we do have in Chazal three different questions. Question number one, pace. Question number two, texture. Question number three, which you alluded to, human initiative or divine authorship. Those are the three big questions about Mashiach. Now the first two questions are easier to resolve than the third question. But I'll tell you how I resolve the third question. I think it's a bit of a novel idea. The first two is pace. Will happen quickly, as you alluded to. Like Mitzrayim seems to be, Chipasa. Chipasa Yatzasa Meretz Mitzrayim overnight, Kechatzos HaLayla, Niyarei Pesach Mitzrayim. 6 hours later, we were in Ramses and leaving. Or will it be lengthy, like, quite frankly, Shivat Sion. Shivat Sion happened over 5 waves. They came back, they built the foundations, they were opposed, it was halted, they came back again, and Zerubbabel, and Nehemiah, and Ezra, and it seems to be from Yeshaya says in Parakin Beis that Ki lo b'chipazam tetzeh. They don't like Mitzrayim, our Geula won't be chipazam, but Chazal certainly had that option. Based on the pasuk Be'ita achishena in Yeshaya, Chazal say if you don't merit it, it will be in its normal time in all drag. If you merit it, then it'll be achishana, then it'll accept. So that's an easier question to solve because there are two different options and our behavior determines which option we're zocheh. A related question, but not necessarily the same question, is based on two different descriptions of Mashiach between Zechariah and Daniel. Daniel describes Mashiach, and not just Mashiach, but the people who lived through Mashiach as arriving on Ananei Shemaya, on heavenly clouds. Heavenly clouds is an easy trip. It's smooth, it's elegant, it's supernatural. Whereas Zechariah famously describes Mashiach. It doesn't just mean Mashiach, it means the whole process is Ani v'rochev al chamor, a poor man riding on a donkey. Has anyone ever here taken a donkey ride? I hope not. It's very rickety, it's bumpy, it's not fun. You don't ride a donkey.
You ever go to Moshe?
What?
You ever go to Moshe?
Don't ride on donkeys. Get horses. Donkeys are for carrying weights, oxen are for plowing, horses are for riding. That's how we use our animals. So that's a second question. Will it be easy or will it be difficult? And again, if we merit it, it'll be easy, if not difficult. Chazal already sensed it. A very foreboding Gemara in Sanhedrin, describing Chevlei Mashiach, very, very difficult period leading up to Mashiach. And Rabbi Yochanan said, Yesi v'loch mini. It should come, but I don't want to be part of it because it seems so treacherous and so difficult. But again, it's not built into history. We don't have to go through Chevlei Mashiach, but unfortunately, it seems like we are going through the birth bank. So those two questions, pace and texture, can be resolved depending upon whether we merit a better, quicker, easier, or more difficult, prolonged one. Not just we merit what HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses. We're not, even if we feel we merit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu may have other algorithms in his mind. The third thing is what you alluded to before, and that's already harder to resolve. And it's Machlokes Rashi tells us about the Beis HaMikdash, but it's more of a metaphor for whether there should be a human initiative or it should be completely delivered by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think that the answer is as follows, and that's of course the big debate today, part of the debate, certainly between Satmar and non-Satmar. Satmar believes there should be completely driven by the Rebbeinu Shalom, other people, not just Dati Yomi, but I think other people. Remember, there are two reasons you can oppose the state of Israel as a divine instrument. You can say it's because of human authorship, and there's no human authorship, that's a Satmar position. There's another position, which is it's secular, and it's not Shemitah Mitzvos. I would allow divine authorship before the Chavetz Chaim and Chazon Ish. But at Jabotinsky and Ben Gurion, how could that be divine authorship in a secular shell? But I think the following. Let me take you a step back. I spend most of my time learning Gemara. When we learn Gemara, we're not trying to find the one truth. Reb Meir says one thing, Vida says another thing. Was there one thing said in Har Sinai? Of course not. Hashem told Moshe in Har Sinai, you see this cup? It's tummy. And you know what else? It's Torah. Now don't expect me to explain it to you because your mind and my mind are binary. For us it's night, it can't be day. If it's day, it can't be night. But for the Rebbeinu Shalom, Yotzer Or Choshech. So Shalom, U'Borei Sachal. And Yov, good and evil. Same thing, either good or evil. Anyone see Oppenheimer? Who was Oppenheimer's Rebbe in physics? Niels Bohr. Niels Bohr was a Dutch physicist. Niels Bohr once said, the opposite of a true statement is a false statement. The opposite of a profound statement is another profound statement. We deal with true and false, on and off, 0 and 1, black and white. Hashem deals in profoundity. When you get to Olam Haba, you'll be freed from your binary trap, and you realize it can be multiple truths. So then, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu created realities that could be true depending upon your perspective. So Reb Meir said, Tzave, Rita said, the star. When we spend time learning Gemara, we're trying to understand the truth behind each other, not trying to vote. Learning Gemara isn't voting. Learning Gemara is trying to understand every single nugget of Hashem's logic as it expresses itself in different positions. Now, here's my question. If Hashem can create a concept that can be seen from different perspectives, can he also create an experience that can be experienced differently? So, Mashiach is either fast or slow, that's empirical, that's quantifiable. It's either easy or hard, quantifiable. But can he create an experience which some people see should be driven solely by him, and other people say should be driven by human initiative? And people just process it differently. Does it have to be black and white? Chazal say that at the Yam Suf, there was a big debate between Binyamin and Yehuda. Binyamin wanted Yam Suf to happen naturally because the winds were blowing. If you look at Parshas Peshat, the winds were blowing all night. If you waited long enough, maybe the winds would blow the waters off. Yehuda wanted something more supernatural. And it got so heated that they stoned. I think Yehuda stoned Binyamin stoned Yehuda. That's how heated it was. But in the end, what happened? I imagine it depended upon your perspective. Some people saw it as the winds all night, and they lived it as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a natural event.
Like the Abramelech.
Right. And some people saw it, say, yeah, that's right. Some people saw it differently. It's if talks about the Machlokes. So, could HaKadosh Baruch Hu be so smart? The answer is yes. That he creates an experience that we process differently. And we process it as human initiative. And other people process it, well, that human initiative isn't contributed to anything, it's only driven by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think we have to be able to see that there are different ways to live through this.
The 6-Day War, what was it?
You don't have to convince me. I agree
No, I'm
with
saying,
you.
if you look at the same one, people are gonna say in the war, 2 different perspectives, it sounds the same action. Was it the army or was it something miracle? The 6-Day War, for example. So you're right, so.
Okay, I'd like to play off a little bit of what Taragin said. There's a beautiful idea, there's an interesting sefer called Likutei Yehuda, which is a collection of the writings of the different Rebbes of Ger written by one of the grandsons who did not become a Rebbe. His name is Haina. They actually own a very large accounting firm here in Yerushalayim now. Haina. Rebbe Farstein, from the Holocaust scholar is Haina. That's her family name. And in there he quotes all kinds of things that were traditionally passed down in the family of the Ger Rebbes, from the Chodesherim, from the Sfas Emes, from the Imrei Emes, that are not written in their actual Svarim. And he says the following idea. He actually says this on the Gemara in Megillah, which says that when they translated the Torah into Greek, they didn't translate that Avram. Last week's parsha, Avram Avinu brought his family on a donkey. Because the Goyim could understand what it means to come on a donkey. What couldn't they understand? Moshe, right. The guy who couldn't understand. I said Avram. Well, I was just talking about that Gemara here on Shabbos. Yeah, Avram, right. Moshe, right.
Rashi the same thing.
What? No, Rashi talks of Avraham, Moshe, Mashiach, Shabbos, something, whatever. So the idea is, he says, you know why Mashiach comes on a chamor? Because Mashiach came on a sus. He come very quickly, and all the people who hadn't yet done tshuva wouldn't be able to catch up. So the Mashiach comes on a chamor very slowly. So everyone else, whoever didn't do tshuva already, has a chance to catch up. And when they see Mashiach, he won't be going on a horse so quickly that they won't be able to catch up. They'll be able to catch up also. That's one idea I'd like to say. In terms of perceiving quickly, slowly, I think there's a very fascinating idea. You mentioned you haven't seen Esav's head in the Maras HaMachpelah. But you said that, right? But you saw Avraham and Yitzchak. Them you saw. Yeah, okay. So we know the Chazal say that Avraham, right? They came to bury Yitzchak Yaakov in the Maras HaMachpelah. Esav is waiting. There's Ramban, which was actually censored out of the Ramban for many years because it was anti-Christian, where the Ramban describes, he says that all of Sefer Bereshis is Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labanim. And he says the final Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labanim is Yaakov being brought back to Eretz Yisrael to be buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And he says Yaakov was brought back as a dead and embalmed body. And he said that might be the way that we return to Eretz Yisrael in such a way. And that's where the Ramban ends. However, I'd like to take it one step further. If they're bringing Yaakov back to Eretz Yisrael to be buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah is the Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labanim, the final Geula, it means there's going to be one more antagonist, which is Esav standing there at the entrance to Ma'aras HaMachpelah, not letting us be buried. So what happens when Esav is standing there? What happens? So they enter into a debate with him. It's my land, it's your land. Who owns it? Here, Yaakov already used it for Leah. I have the other grave, says Esav. The sons say, no, we have a contract that you sold it to Yaakov for all the money that he earned in the house of Lavan. Well, show me the contract. And everyone knows, what do? No. They send Naphtali down to Mitzrayim running quickly to bring the contract. But there's one child there. There's a grandchild of Yaakov, Chushim ben Dan. Chushim ben Dan, his Chushim were not so exact, so keen. He couldn't hear well. And he, standing there looking what's going on. Why is Zave in the middle of the hot sun? Actually, it was Hanukkah time. In the middle of the rain. And they're not burying him. And there's this big guy we never saw before stopping them from burying him. And he starts going to his uncles. Uncle Reuven. Uncle Reuven says, leave me alone, Chushim. We're busy. Uncle Gad. Leave me alone, Chushim. We're busy. Goes over to Uncle, I don't know, Uncle whoever. Goes over to Uncle Yabba, what's going on? He says, Chushim, do you hear me? He says, yeah. That's Uncle Esav. Who's Uncle Esav? They tell him who Uncle Esav is because they never saw Uncle Esav. We never talked about him in the family. And Chushim gets so incensed that he either cuts off Esav's head, or the other version, a different chazal, he hits Esav and then Yehuda cuts off Esav's head. That's the last stage of the Geula. And Naphtali, meanwhile, is busy running, trying to bring the contract back from Mitzrayim. I think this is the two kinds of Geula. There's Be'ita and Achishem. Naphtali is the Geula of Be'ita. We have a contract, it's ours, we deserve it, we'll prove it to you, we'll get it like that. Why? But what is the Geula of Achishena of Chushim? So I heard a metaphor once, I'm sure many people have heard this, about the frog in the pot of water. Take a frog, drop it into a pot of boiling water, what will it do? Jump out. Put a frog into a pot of nice warm water, what will the frog do? Swim around, it'll be very happy. Start making the fire a little bit warmer, a little bit warmer, a little bit warmer, the frog won't realize that it's being boiled alive. When we enter into a debate with Esav about whether or not Geula is here, we become sort of acclimatized. We have to go to the UN, we have to debate, we have to make the Americans happy, right? Because we're, Baruch Hashem, we can hear, we can see, all of our senses seem to be okay. Chushim, what do you mean? There's a Geula of Be'ita, which is a natural process of Geula. There's also a Geula of Achishena, of Chushim ben Dan, which is what? The Geula of Chushim ben Dan is what? There's rishus in the world? We got to do something about it. And that's Be'ita and Achishena. The fact that Dan is the one that actually happens, I'm not making any particulars. They're both in the Chazal. They're both the Chazal told us about Naphtali also. What I'm saying is we The Torah already laid out two processes for us. But one of them requires a chushin. One of them requires this overwhelming experience of what? We're Klal Yisrael. We can't let this happen to us. So therefore, can it be verifying? Yeah. Can there be some cataclysmic event that will make us all be like Chushim Medan? All of a sudden, all of Klal Yisrael's ears will be able to hear what? We're meant to be Klal Yisrael. If such an event happens, it should be in a way with lots of chesed and rachamim. We say, "V'sechazen eineinu b'shuv chol Tzion." B'rachamim. Why? Because v'sechazen eineinu b'shuv chol Tzion, that's going to happen. Kosh Baruch Hu make it b'rachamim. Make it b'rachamim. So therefore, are these two processes taking place? Yeah. They're happening simultaneously. And as the Ramchal says, they answer the machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos, and the different Chazal, because Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim. The Ramchal has a beautiful sefer called Mishkanei Elyon, right? And in there he says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chayim. The physical part will come from us, and the ruchni part will descend down and be mitlabesh on the physical part that we do. And for the past 100 or so years, one of the people who tzipisa Yeshua was something that he lived by more than ever was the Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim began, I don't know, probably the first kolo of only Kohanim and Levim. The Lubavitz, the Rabbi Yosef Kahneman and the Rashiv Panovich, they all learned in that kolo to learn Hilchos Beis HaMikdash. Even in Chutz La'aretz they did. And they were connected to it. And therefore, there's the joining together of the two. There's the Yeteruta L'Tata that brings down the Yeteruta L'Eila, and together that creates the Beis HaMikdash, which is a complete Beis HaMikdash of Bayis Shlishi. Yeah.
Change around Chushim, you get Mashiach. Change
Yes.
around
Right.
they say
Yes,
the
Chushim, you get
weather
Mashiach.
of
Yes.
Mashiach
Okay.
will be
It's a 45-minute class. It was also Dvar Torah I said at my grandson's bris on Sukkot, because his name is Yishai Naftali. So Yishai is David ben Yishai, and Naftali is Naftali, and that was the Dvar Torah I said at his bris. Sukkot time.
Rabbi Rudman, you mentioned that we're asking for Mashiach to come to Sechazan and Barachamim, L'Tzion Barachamim, and Rabbi Taragin, you mentioned the Chavlei Mashiach. How are we meant to relate to Geula in times of national or personal suffering? Is Mashiach and Geula something we're meant to look at as the antidote to human suffering, that it'll come and just wipe away everything that ails us or pains us? And the flip side of that is when we are in the midst of those Chavlei Mashiach or that national personal suffering, how can we use this Geula process and the concept of Mashiach to strengthen us?
Look, I always think about this, we have this midrash about the tzvi, okay? The tzvi is, this running, matzvi, he's running on this hill, and he's going up and down, and sometimes you see him, and sometimes you do not. Now, we know we're now in a process. Now, when we don't see this tzvi, this animal, sometimes we don't see the Geula. Did we see the Geula in the 7th of October? Did we see the Geula in a lot of, other actions? Did we see those spots? No, but we know we're in a long, long process now. And we know the aim, the aim. And the fact that we know that now we're in the process of, we mentioned we're Mashiach, and the process of Mashiach we said Mashiach ben Yosef, and now we're in the process, beginning of Mashiach ben David. We don't know exactly, to identify the two, these two processes, but even when there are bad, things that happen to us, riots, or the fact that we know the goal, so this is something that this keeps the teshuva. Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example again from Harabite. Okay, I spoke to this man after he mentioned that we were in the 6-day war. After the 6-day war, they opened. Finally, we got Harabite. We got the old city. We got the Kotel. Okay, it was for 19 years in the Jordan. It was owned by the Jordanians, and finally we got Harabite, and everybody came to the Kotel. And I met this man we call Rav Elboim, that he started going up to Harabite in 1968, something like that. And he was the only person. He knocked on the door, and he's this He's this Haredi Hasidic from, I think he's Vishnitz, if I'm not mistaken. And he, looks Haredi. And he came in 1968. He said, I want to go to Harabait. No way, you cannot. No, there's no option. And for a whole year, he was knocking on the door, the entrance of Harabait, and they didn't agree. And then finally, and he was the only one that was walking over there. Everybody came to the Kotel. Now, and then it started slowly process, 5 people, 10 people, and my husband, my husband is a lawyer, and for a long time, a lot of times people that wanted to daven over there, wanted to pray, wanted to bow down, every time he called, he got a phone call, you must go to the police station because they were arrested. Now, but the process, we know the process, and we see it in our eyes how things are changing. And for example, a year and a half ago, I was there in Tisha B'Av. Yeah, it was exactly a year and a half ago. And a group of people went on Harabait, hundreds of people, if 20 years ago we were only a few individuals. And suddenly I was standing over there and I see a group of these young teenagers bowing down in Harabait. Remember just a couple, not long ago, they were arrested, and they were just bowing down with their hands on the floor, like their face on the floor, hands and feet, and the police didn't do anything. And it was something I said, wait, what's going on? Because there's a halakha in Harabait, you could bow down like we do in Yom Kippur. We don't have to put any kerchief or nothing but we could just bow down. And the group of people, the group of these teenagers, like about 30 of them just did it, and the police did not do anything. And it showed that this is a process started with this Rav Elbaum that didn't give up and went to 1968, 1969, 1970, was only 5, 6, 10 people, and things are really very, very changing. So the fact that up till today, people sometimes, my son was, he got this thing, he cannot go. He went with his tefillin on Harabait, and he told him, hey, 4 months you cannot come to Harabait because you put your tefillin. But these things don't make up. We know the goal, we know the aim, we see the process, we think seeing change, things are changing so fast. So also when we have the problems, we have other things. So I think, like I said, you see the sign over here, and by us coming to this place, by us not only, like we mentioned before, not only coming to the Kotel, but rather being in this place itself. And even though sometimes people are being arrested, but with our kavanah, with our ratzon, and things are going to change.
I think you have to be careful about 2 issues. It's very important not to use Geula and the thrill of Geula, the enthusiasm of Geula, to whitewash suffering and pain. And that's on 2 levels. The story I heard from Ophir Shire, whose son Gilad was one of the 3 boys who were kidnapped in Gush Etzion. So my Rebbe, Rav Lichtenstein, went into the Shiva house, and supposedly everyone, I heard the story from Ophir, everyone there was describing to his grieving father, here's something to Rabbi Akiva, he's a Shemayim, he's a Kiddush Elyon, and the father didn't want to hear that. The father was just, he missed his son, and he was crying, and Rav Lichtenstein just related to him on a human level. And sometimes we're very quick to kumbaya it all away because of Geula, and this is all Geula, this is the price of Geula. We're sitting here in this room, and our country is filled with suffering and empty seats, and husbands have been away. My son was injured, and Baruch Hashem, he's healed and healing. And so you have to be very, very careful never to allow ideology to come before sympathy. In this week's parsha, Moshe goes back to Israel to ask his permission to go to Mitzrayim, even though every hour he delays, another Jew is being killed. because kavod habrios can't be ignored for the sake of Geula. So on a human level, we have to be very, very, very careful not to speak in ways that are celebratory, triumphant, and it's all going to end with roses and peaches, when along that route there's a lot of suffering. So we have to reach out to people and be careful about the language you use. And second of all, not just on a personal level, but I've heard people say, look at the state of OUisrael now, October 6th, where we were, now look at where we are, no Iran, no Hezbollah, no Hamas, and it's so wonderful, and what needs to be found, which is true. You have to be makir nace. But also, you have to scream out to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu could have accomplished this other ways. And why did it have to entail so much suffering? And Moshe Rabbeinu says at the end of Shema Salam Harayos Salam Hazeh, why did you? He didn't say, what did know Geula is coming. He knows OUisrael is suffering. It's the first, it's a medrash at the beginning of Parshas Ve'era. Vaydaber Elokeinu Moshe, Vayomer Lo Ani Hashem. Hashem is Kiva Yochel angry, Midas Hadin. But Ani Hashem, the medrash says, because I know you're asking for OUisrael. If you'd be angry at me for yourself, then I'd be angry at you, Midas Hadin. But I know you're crying out for OUisrael, therefore Ani Hashem, and like Rachmanos on you. So you believe Hashem is Melech HaMishpat, you believe He's Melech HaRachamim, you believe He's Melech HaBris. How can you daven without asking why? And if you don't ask why, it's a chisar in Abbas Yisrael. Because you obviously believe Hashem is Melech HaMishpat, and Melech HaRachamim, and Melech HaBris, and how could this happen? So sometimes you have to be careful to hold conflicting voices in your head, and not to get on the runaway train of Geula, and just whitewash everything. Oh, we're in Geula, it's all going to turn out wonderful, tomorrow will be a better day, and the rainbow's going to shine, and there are human beings that are suffering, and also to reverentially, with respect, ask questions of Kadosh Baruch Hu, may have OUisrael, because it shows you Ahavas Yisrael, because how could there be so much suffering to our people? So I think that's one area to be careful, not to let Geula whitewash suffering and pain and crisis. The second thing is, I think you have to, just like Geula makes us look to the future, as you said, it's a long story, and more chapters in the story, and even if we don't accomplish, sounds that I know, all right, so we'll see, they won't see everything that is said here. But it also, because we're in Geula, it also makes us be more attentive to the past, because we're more attentive to history. And I think that being involved in the process of Geula, it's like a tunnel. When you're in the tunnel, it's hard to see the tunnel. When you come out of the tunnel, it's easy to look back at the tunnel and appreciate how you made it through the tunnel. So we've left the tunnel of Galus, whether it's spiritually or not, but without getting into the ideology, but we're in a different state. I think we have to look back at Galus differently. And part of looking back at Galus, which is very dangerous in Eretz Yisrael, because Israelis don't have a healthy view of Galus. As far as secular Israel is concerned, Jewish history began in 1948. Everything between 70 AD and 1948 is shameful, embarrassing, and a hibernation of history. We don't see it that way. And wherever we're going through, ask yourself the following question. What would your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents do to switch places with you? With all the suffering, and all the anti-Semitism, and all the Hamas, and everything, what would they give to trade places with you? And perspective is part of Emunah. And cowardice is a chisar in Emunah. And October 7th wasn't the first pogrom in history, but it was the first pogrom followed by a war. Because previous pogroms are followed by the next pogroms. And where were your great-great-great-great-grandparents January 12th, not 2026, but 1626 and 1226? They were recovering from the Christmas pogrom, which was inevitable. And his ferocity was totally dependent upon how vitriolic the pastor's speech was that year. And they were more than bandaging their wounds and healing the dead and burying the dead and preparing for the next pogrom, which is 4 months away in Easter. So a little perspective, Geula gives you that perspective, not just going forward, that there's a story that we're writing that has an inevitable ending, but also we're part of a legacy of people who have held their faith. And the least we can do is hold our faith, because they held it under conditions that were much more severe than whatever conditions we're facing. So you look back to the past and you get perspective. I was thinking about something else, but it skipped my mind, but maybe we'll come back to it later. So that's, I think it's important to be hopeful, prophetic, visionary, but also realistic and historically attuned to our place in history. And also, I guess, as I wanted to say, in another view, had they committed their miscue, whatever that miscue was, somewhere else, they wouldn't have been punished. It's the price for living in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we were chosen. Our generation was chosen to be the pioneers of history, to rewrite history not just in the backstage with Torah mitzvahs, but on the front stage by building infrastructure as well. But it comes with a price. Esav didn't want to accept that price. Twice he balked. What does Rashi say? Tell me about this kahuna. I'm going to suffer, I'm going to die, make one mistake, I don't want it. And then later in Parshas Vayishlach, when Esav leaves the country, he says, He knew that living in Israel takes a price. So when we realize that it's a schus to be here, there are no free lunches, and the schus of living in Eretz Yisrael and living in this generation means that we have hardships. It's not anecdotal; it's built in. But Jews see glory; they don't see suffering. They see that these challenges are just part of Lifnei Hashem, and living Lifnei Hashem is going to put us in literally in the front row of history. But the front row of history has bullseyes on them also. So that's part of the schus of living here. We have to avoid it.
I'd like this from a slightly different perspective. Tuesday, October, whatever it was, 4th. My wife and I went to the Kotel for Mincha and Ma'ariv. It was beautiful. It was packed. We walked back. We went to visit a cousin whose granddaughter got married in Chutz La'aretz. She made a beautiful reception for her in her sukkah. We got to meet the chassan. We went from there to a Simchas Beis Shoim with one of our very good friends. And not once during that period of time did I think about Mashiach and think about Geula. Because everything was great. I walked by the Waldorf. It was like walking through Lawrence. Everything was fine. October 7th, all of a sudden, Mashiach has to come. I saw the same thing also in Corona. All of the prophets, who were prophesizing on YouTube. The words of the prophets are written on a YouTube show. No, the words of the prophets are written on...
Subway home.
Thank you. Okay. Someone from that generation, okay? So there's the words of all those prophets, and I mean our prophets, people from, with, beards and yarmulkes and kippos of different stripes and shapes and sizes and everything. We're saying, oh, Mashiach is coming. You can open the door, you don't know who's going to be there. Speaking as a teacher, okay, who was in touch with all the students had left, and they were all there were people who went into depressions because Mashiach didn't come. People literally depressed. Had to deal with it. Like, they told me Mashiach is coming. Right? So, the living, Geula in a time of crisis, like you said, it's not a nation. It's not a elixir that we give a few drops of Geula and then everything's going to be good. We have to, on the one hand, we have to live with Geula beforehand, even in the good times. Right? When no one is talking about Mashiach is coming. Or if they do, it's not with that same depth or fervor or external fervor. And at the same time, we have to know that we can't promise that the bad times are going to bring to Mashiach. Even though, in this week's probably, the whole idea of Geula, of the Golus of Mitzrayim, so Hasemis quotes it numerous times, Chazal. The Chazal that talks about the idea of Shlosha Torah Nikna B'Yisurin. And as you said, one of the things that Nikna B'Yisurin is Eretz Yisrael. We're here in Eretz Yisrael, we have to be aware of that. On the other hand, you can use the Gemara, which says, what's Yisurin? Yisurin is you reach into your pocket to take out a coin, you take out a shekel instead of 2 shekel, that's also Yisurin. But it's a matter of understanding. How can that be Yisurin? That means that I understand the world's run by Kosh Baruch Hu. I put my hand in the pocket for the right reason, and I take out the other coin, that means that Kosh Baruch Hu is not letting it happen the way I want it to. So therefore, living in Eretz Yisrael, as you said, is dwelling, is living, it comes with a responsibility. I always look at that beautiful apartment overlooking the Kotel, with the big bay window. There's that gorgeous apartment overlooking the Kotel. There's one of them is actually now for sale, way out of my range. But the point is, I always thought to myself, would I want to buy that apartment? Because what would I do? If I put my feet up on the coffee table, I'm in front of our Bayis, in front of the Kotel. But can I live my entire life with the true Yiras HaMikdash, looking at the Kotel every time I get up in the morning in my pajamas? How do I do that? But it's not just the Kotel. First of all, it's everywhere. But in Eretz Yisrael, we're here. And it comes with a responsibility, and it comes with an opportunity that we are the generation that's blessed to have this. And it comes with the responsibility of how to utilize it. Therefore, to use Geula as an aspirin, some kind of, saccharine, I would actually say, something to make things on the surface easy is not right, it's not fair. Because Geula itself comes with a process that requires hard work and effort. Baruch Hashem, all the hard work all of us have put in to be here in Eretz Yisrael. It's hard work for everybody to move to, come to Eretz Yisrael, to move to Eretz Yisrael. Move from different parts of your family, whatever each and every one of us did in order to be able to come here to Eretz Yisrael and be here. But at the same time, and that should be the biggest yisur that we have. That we have to fly back on coach, not on premium. That should be our yisur. If anyone's flown to Los Angeles and coach, that's yisur. Okay, but understand that the Geula requires effort. Yisur also doesn't have to mean also pain. Yisur is the effort, right? Yisrael nikdav yisur, Torah nikdav yisur, and ultimately Allah Haba is nikdav yisur. And the understanding that this is things that we, through those things themselves, which is what the Sfas talks about throughout Parshas Shmos and Parshas Ve'era, that through those things themselves is the way that we purify ourselves in order to then reach to the ruchnis. Again, as you said, you can't tell that to someone who's sitting shiva for a child who was part of that deeper yisur. But as a nation, as ourselves individually, we have to understand that that's part of what the process is.
I just want to ask one more question. It is getting late, so we're going to answer this quickly. But the last question is, obviously everybody who's here is involved in thinking about Geula. What do you suggest is the best way to bring Geula into conversation, into education, formally and informally? And how do we speak, again, very quickly, how do we speak to people who are at best apathetic or have given up? Or are less involved? They live far away, they don't think it's relevant, or...
I'll just end very quickly with the story. It was the end of the year in one of the seminaries. I won't say which one to not embarrass anybody. And my wife and I were doing a question and answer session at the end of the year. And it was Friday, late Leil Shabbos, Friday night, and questions and discussions, and very deep. Everyone was very involved. The lights went out because they hadn't set the Shabbos clock, realizing how long it was going to go. And from within the darkness, a question asked, but what if I really, really don't like and don't want to be in Eretz Yisrael? What should I do? I never would have said this if the lights were on, but I said, you know what? If that's what you feel, then you can't say Shemona Esrei. You can't say 19 brachos. You can only say 17 brachos. Skip es tzemach l'lavtecha v'sechazeh na'imim. Because you have no right to say them. No? What? I know. What? I don't know who said the question. I don't know where she's from. I know she's living now in Eretz Yisrael. I hope she is, Maybe she's in this room. So no, there's no one. Any Mechel Machal in this room as far as I know. Yeah? Not from my time. So but I'm saying is there's Geula is something that as a teacher, as a person who interacts with people, we're always, it's part of, if a person lives in Eretz Yisrael, a person lives Eretz Yisrael, it's part of everything that they said. It's part of the Eretz Yisrael, it's part of the fabric of what Klal Yisrael is in this generation, Baruch Hashem. And it comes through.
I have two quick ideas to bring Geula into the conversation. One is risky, but it'll work. Vote for Mamdani. Rav Kook had a very famous Erev Rosh Hashanah shmuz. It talks about 3 different shofaros. Because the Gemara talks about 3 different shofaros, 3 different ways Jews get called back. And the last shofar is the shofar of the sun. We blow the shofar for the sun. That was his poetic license. All kidding aside, obviously we don't hope for misfortune for any Yidden. At a practical level, I think that one of the big misses that American high school education, or American discourses, they're not teaching enough Jewish history. Because when you know where you come from, you know where you're going. And you feel part of the process, and I'm very, very worried that there's a lot of ritual excellence, but very little Jewish identity and historical awareness. And that's going to wear thin, because at a certain point, the rituals become dry and performative, and mitzvahs become mitzvahs and without a spirit of Jewish identity and Jewish history, and what do we owe to history, what are my responsibilities. When I was young, I enjoyed sports, but I never would wear a shirt with the player's name on my back. My name was Taragin, my name wasn't Hernandez or Fernandez. When I went to the sporting events, I knew I was an outsider. I said this a couple of months ago in America. I took a lot of flack for it. In Yankee Stadium, they have minyanim that they announce in gate D3, and everyone flocks to daven mincha. That's unheard of outside of America. In the UK, you go to a sporting event, if you go and you hide your Yiddishkeit, you're an outsider, you're scared, you'd sit there and Americans feel like they're Balabatim.
They owned the teams. There were 3 or 4
Yeah.
Furman who owned.
So I said, you could disagree with this, which is fine, you won't be the first. I said, in my opinion, they should cancel the minyan. It's better that Americans should feel less ownership and less able to daven, and daven bichidus when they get home, and realize they're not home, and realize that we don't make minyan. Not because it's a sports stadium, but so I'm worried that as we get more from, we're also becoming a little less proud of where we belong. And I don't need people there. My Rebbe Rami told me with this, I'll end, let me do it tonight, that in Europe, the worst thing you could call someone was firm. Because firm was Rashi Tevis for Yiddish, fear rishus and Vedic mitzvahs. A lot of rishus and no mitzvahs. The bigger word that you call someone in Europe was erlich. That's how you praise someone. Sometimes firmkeit can be a little bit, das is an erlich mensch, das is an erlich mensch. Sometimes we're getting very, very good at how much matzah we eat, how much filling, but I think everything that comes with it is becoming attenuated. So I think we fill that up, then even if you don't make Aliyah tomorrow, I think people will leave Geula, will leave Eretz Yisrael. Will live the famous Medrash of Moshe wants to come into Eretz Yisrael because he's carrying Yosef's bones. And he said, what is Yosef going and I don't go in? It's a Medrash in Parshat V'Schanan. And the premise of the question is neither of us lived in Eretz Yisrael, because Moshe never lived in Eretz Yisrael. Yosef lived there 17 years. So Hashem tells Moshe, it's really interesting, he tells Moshe, Yosef hoda b'arza. You are not hoda b'arza. Yosef acknowledged Eretz Yisrael, and therefore he comes there and he's buried there. You did acknowledge. What does he acknowledge? Because Yosef lives in Mitzrayim, but he always says, he knows that he's in every. And Moshe, when the daughters of Yisrael introduce him, Ish Mitzri Yitzilano. He doesn't bang his fist down and say, so it's not about who learned more Plat Gemara, Moshe or Yosef, it's who felt and expressed himself. I belong elsewhere. I'm stuck here. Kosh Baruch Hu wants me here, but I know that I don't belong here. That's something I think we have to work very, very hard on. It's not easy.
There's a Sefer Chassidim that says that Jews in Chutz La'aretz don't build houses of stone because that's a sign of permanence. They only build houses of wood because that's flimsy.
Like the Mishkan.
I think with Mishkans.
So first of all, when we want to, let's say, talk about Lashon Hara, and we want to be attention on what we say, so we start learning Hilchot Lashon Hara. And the minute we start learning Hilchot Lashon Hara, we'll pay attention to what we take out from our mouth. So the same thing, when we want to talk about Geula, we have to learn about Geula. And it's making like groups of, shiurim for women. It could be on Shabbos, it could be Rosh Chodesh, and learning about what's Geula, learning about the Bet HaMikdash, how are the holidays and all the Chagim. So there's a lot more to learn. That's first thing. I really believe in that. Second is go out. I'm also a tour guide, so being outside and where the things happen, I really believe if we go to, let's say, Ir David, the city of David, and hear the stories of Beit Rishon, and seeing actually the things, going near Har Bayit, everybody goes to the western wall, but to go to the eastern wall of Har Bayit, there's another wall to be there, to daven over there, to see. There is, up in the Galil, there's a places, after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, we had the Sanhedrin, so the Sanhedrin moved up to the north, to the Galil, and today there's a whole trail, it's called in Hebrew, Shvil HaSanhedrin, and all the different places that the Sanhedrin used to be up in the Galil, so to go to Tzipora, to go to Bet Sharim, to go to the places where the Tanakh, so I really believe that when you go outside and you travel, this connects us, really, really connects us to go to the place where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote the Mishnah and all these places. So this is a very, another way of connecting us to the Geula, connecting us to Eretz Yisrael. So first of all, I'm inviting you to come to my house, to Har Zaytim, to see the place, to see Har Bayit, to see the place. Yes. So these are two very aspects. And started having in the OU Center class about that. Oh my gosh, yeah. What about it? What do you say about it? This is the best, the best way of connecting.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for being here.